Shalom, everybody, and thank you very much for taking the time to do this Zoom with me, discussing the Middle East conflict and the current events in the war between Israel and Gaza. I hope you're coming here for a good reason, and that your reason is that you want to get a better understanding of the situation, but also because you understand that whatever is happening in Israel is a mirror for things that are happening all around the world. And if it escalates from here, it might affect you wherever you are. It doesn't matter where you live around the globe. We are all experiencing evil in one form or another. This is the reason why we have to be aware of the situation that exists in Israel, because if it happens in Vegas, it stays in Vegas. But if it happens in Israel, it affects the whole world. Let me just give you one example. You don't know that, but in the Middle East, on a weekly basis or on a monthly basis, there is a massacre that happened. Some other society is experiencing some terror attack. People are being slaughtered. Women are being raped. People are being tortured to death. Those are the kind of things that happen in different places around the Middle East, especially because there are certain places that live in a different mindset than the one that we are living in the Western world. Now, a few things about myself, because I know this presentation is going to be shared with other people. So my name is Erez Landau. I am an official tour guide here in Israel. I have a boutique travel agency. I work with people from all around the world. And also for many years, I served as the tour specialist for the Moshe Dayan Center, which is one of the most important research centers in the world for the studies of the Middle East history. And I've been working with professors from all around the world that teach the Middle East conflict. And I learned from them what are the most important things to focus on while we're discussing the conflict. And just like everybody, I came with my own unique way of thinking of what might be the solution. Now, one of the things that you need to take into consideration is the famous sentence coming from Albert Einstein: more important than knowledge is imagination. But in order to start imagining, we have to understand the situation on the ground. And when we understand the situation on the ground, I want you to make it personal. I want you to make it personal to the extent that what I'm about to discuss with you is relevant to you specifically, watching this from wherever you are, whether you're in New Zealand or in America or here in Israel. What I have to say is relevant for everybody. And why? Let me share with you something personal. This is the moment to say, Mazel Tov. I'm about to become a father very soon. And I'm very, very excited. I promise you, I am sure that my life is about to change. But while I'm fascinated and curious about this infinite love and beautiful experience that I'm about to have with my daughter, I'm also worried that I might find one day her picture like this in the news, being kidnapped by Hamas. This is Abigail. She's one out of 30 kids that was kidnapped by the Hamas on the 7th of October. Aside to the 30 kids that were kidnapped by the Hamas, which is a brutal, barbarian, terror organization, which unfortunately people are not aware of how dangerous it is. So dangerous that they kidnap kids from their own homes. They also kidnapped other 200 soldiers and civilians. They massacred hundreds of people that were celebrating in a music festival in the desert, and people who were simply enjoying their day of rest, the Sabbath, in their home. Now look, one of the major problems that we see when we deal with the Middle East conflict is that people have no idea what they're dealing with. Now, we are living in a time when sometimes people like to take advantage of situations that have a huge popularity over the media and use it in order to raise awareness for their own issues. Let me just give you one example that shocks me. It just shocks me when I see something like this. Take a look at this. This is what happens when you write on Google queers for Palestine. Queers for Palestine. Well, let's get that straight. I have no issue whatsoever with sexual preferences. I live in Israel. Israel is a place where we have the biggest gay parade in the world. People wish to experience their sexuality in a certain fashion. By all means, enjoy. But take into consideration that while you are writing queers for Palestine, Palestinian people are 100% Muslim. Not 95, not 97, 100% Muslim. If you tell a Muslim that you are gay, well, let me show you what happens in a mosque where the sheikh wishes to discuss people what is his preference, what is his opinion about gay behavior.
ترضى أن يكون لوطي واحد يجاهر بفاحشته؟ هل ترضون أن يكون على أرض القدس وفلسطين لوطي واحد؟ هل ترضون؟ ولا يرضى شعبنا أن توجد مؤسسات للفاحشة ومقدماتها على أرض فلسطين المباركة الطاهرة، ولا يقبل أن تمس أحكام الشريعة بنقص أو تبديل، ولا يرضى بالمناهج المناهضة لأحكام الإسلام. فاقتدوا يا مسلمون برسولكم صلى الله عليه وسلم، وضعوا تحت أقدامكم كل منكر وكل حرام وكل ما يخالف دينكم الإسلام. ومن الفسوق الاختلاط في الجامعات، وقد رأيتم بعض نتائجه بقتل بعض الطالبات في بعض الجامعات العربية. ونؤكد رفضنا وبغضنا لكل مظاهر المثلية والشذوذ، والتي هي اللواط الذي أهلك الله مجرميه بالعذاب الشديد. ونؤكد رفضنا القاطع لوجود المؤسسات التي تدعو إلى الشذوذ والإباحية، ونطالب بإغلاقها فورا، فهذه وأمثالها من معوقات النصر، وهي سبب في نزول غضب الله علينا جميعا.
Okay, now you got the picture. So if you have gay friends and you see those protests that I see all the time in universities around the United States of America and Europe, people cheering for Palestine, people cheering for their rights, well, the first thing that we need to understand is their tradition, where they're coming from, what they believe, what they don't believe. And I respect that as well. If they think that gay behavior is something which is unaccepted for them, then you might as well considering supporting their ideals. But I'll tell you even more than that. The major problem is that Palestinian people are not being represented properly. I'm pretty sure that a lot of the Palestinians, if you really ask them in the end of the day, they couldn't care less about your sexual preferences. They would love to come back home and make love to their wife, spend time with their children, have a nice dinner. But unfortunately, they can't do that. They can't express their natural behaviors because they're being ruled by a terror organization called Hamas. That organization is the organization that terrorizes their lives. When you're talking about free Palestine, you have to say free Palestine from whom? You have to free them from Hamas. And we'll get into that very, very soon when you understand the real picture. Now, when it comes to queers who are trying to raise awareness for their sexual preferences, there are certain people around the globe that already have a significant following in the media. There are significant crowds that follow their behaviors and worship them and will follow them and do whatever they tell them because they admire them. And for example, we're talking about soccer players. So this is a situation that happened a few years ago when players from soccer teams in England decided to take the Palestinian flag and create a demonstration. What they didn't expect coming is Erez Landau, a very famous Israeli soccer player, to take their picture and make a Photoshop of it and thank them for their support. Now, they got angry, not just them, their followers on social media, all of them got super angry, like mega angry. And this is when Erez Landau posted this on his Instagram account. Now, when I got your attention, this is time to explain the real situation. None of you know the roots of the conflict, and maybe you don't even know where is Gaza or Jerusalem on the map, so better use your social media to call for peace from both sides, and then everything will be more simple. Iran is so right, so right. It's unbelievable how right it is. Most people don't have a clue what is really going on in the Middle East. And who can blame them? You know, I work a lot with American people. If you ask me exactly where is each and every city on the map, I don't know. If you ask me about the conflict that exists between Republicans and Democrats, or if you ask me about the issues that revolve around certain communities over there, I don't really know. I don't live there. But I don't make an opinion about it. And the problem is that today, with social media, with everybody has this weapon called keyboard, people don't take seriously enough the effect of what happens with their fingers when they click on the keyboard. So having said that, I want to thank you in advance for taking the time and energy to listen to this presentation. That means you make a choice. You chose to understand better. You choose to recognize that what happens in Israel is something that can happen where you are. The problem is not necessarily Palestine or Israel. It's about evil. It's about evil and how you prevent evil, how you cut it from the source, eliminate it, and make sure it doesn't happen again. And believe we can do it. One of the foundations of understanding it is that my presentation is not about who is right and who is wrong. It's not even about what is the definition of justice. It's about how we move forward and onward and create the reality we really wish to experience. And as I said, if it happens in Israel and the Middle East, it has the growth potential to make an impact on the whole world. So by understanding what's happening in Israel is understanding what is real and how we can heal. So let's get into it. When we talk about the Middle East and Israel especially, we are talking about also Palestine. Yeah, Palestine is a name that was used earlier while this whole regime was a part of the big Ottoman Empire. And even before that, that was the name of the area. It's also referred to as the land of milk and honey, like it was written about it in the Bible. But the best branding that was ever given to this little piece of territory is to Holy Land. Now you might wonder, why so many names? Belgium is just Belgium. England is just England. Why these countries? Israel, it's Palestine, it's the land of milk and honey, it's the Holy Land. It's because it was shaped and designed by history. When some of the most meaningful characters who ever set their foot on the face of the earth, they've been here. And it's characters that regardless whether you're coming from Lithuania, Korea, China, South America, everybody know Abraham, the father, Isaac, Jacob, David, Goliath. It's because they're biblical characters that the Bible is still the bestseller of all times. It sold more copies than Harry Potter, even if you include the amount of people that watch Harry Potter in the cinema, and I'm including all the books and all the people that watched it in the cinema, you still don't get to 6 billion copies, and that's only in the last 200 years. not going to even try and describe what happened before that. What I will say a few more words about is that David is fighting Goliath, the Philistine. Is there a connection between Goliath, the Philistine, that was knocked by David down, and the Palestinian people? No. Yet it's interesting how the name lasted. Because the Philistines are going to lose in this battle and then in several more battles, and this is why they will vanish from the face of the earth. And you don't have Philistines, but you have Palestinians, and we will get to that later. Because our story continues when Jewish people are establishing a kingdom in the Holy Land. They are establishing a royalty, which goes all the way from King David and Solomon and the rest of their children, until during the time of the Babylonians, they would lose the battle and the temple will be destroyed and they will be exiled to the diaspora. They will make a comeback and then establish a new temple and establish a new society and a new community in the Holy Land, which lasts during the times of the Greeks that were here and also during the time, sorry about that, of the Romans. The Roman Empire also had a province here. They will conquer the area in 63 BC, and they will name the place Provincia Judea, the Jewish province of the Roman Empire. Now, the Romans, when they're coming over here, they bring a lot of technology, especially due to the amazing work of King Herod. I don't know if some of you heard about him, but those of you who have been to Israel probably heard me glorifying the man that, well, as I always say, I say thank you, Mom and Dad, for giving me life. Thank you, King Herod, for providing me with work, because most of the tourists that come to Israel, they come to see monuments that were built by King Herod, such as the port in Caesarea, such as the fortress of Masada, such as the tombs of our forefathers, Abraham, Sarah, Jacob, Isaac, and such as the Second Temple in Jerusalem. This is why people would march all the way from Rome to the Jewish province of the Roman Empire in order to see these monuments that we still have their remains today. What we also have remains of is the fact that the Romans left a lot of bloodshed. These people were quite violent. They were also very materialistic. They loved drinking wine. They loved fighting. They loved sex. It was one big orgy of materialistic society, which is interesting because that society set the platform for the uprising of the most popular Jew in history. And obviously, I'm talking about Jesus Christ, the founder of Christianity. Jesus is an amazing character when you think about it. In his absence, he is the spiritual leader of 2.5 billion people around the world. His story is so vivid in the lives of billions of people around the world that he's connecting them to spirituality, to what does it really mean to live a life of connection to a higher power, to something which is beyond our perception. What is to be a member in the kingdom of heaven? He was preaching to people to leave the old dogmas. By the way, he was the one to piss up a few of the rabbis while he was preaching against materialism, while he was preaching against the fact that the spiritual celebration that used to exist in the temple got commercialized. Jesus' prophecy that the temple will be destroyed comes into fruition in the year 70 when the temple was destroyed. Just to give you a little bit of perspective, when the first temple was destroyed by the Babylonians, they said in the Jewish culture that it was destroyed because of corruption, sexual relationships inside the families, and killings that are due to corruptions. So after 70 years, Jewish people came back and reestablished a new temple. When that destroyed, our ancient wisdom is telling us that it was destroyed because of false hatred. So think about it. Because of 3 things, after 70 years, we got back and reestablished our temple. But because of false hatred, because of wrong attitude that we had towards one another, The temple was destroyed more than 2,000 years ago and hasn't been built yet. According to the prophecies, it was destroyed because of false hatred, and it will be built because of free love. And hopefully we're going to get to that. And I can tell you already that there are certain signs out there that show that we are living in a time of redemption. Yet, before we see redemption, people say that before you get to see the light, it gets darker. And unfortunately, it gets darker because of a lot of misunderstandings revolving this person in the picture, or more accurately, the person that I cannot really show in the picture, Prophet Muhammad, where people around the world would tell you that it's not allowed to show his portrait. This is a moment when I'm going to stop my presentation over here. Just escape it. And simply go online. Check this out. Move, please. Thank you. What happens when you write Prophet Muhammad on Google and you ask for images? Whoops. There's a lot of portraits of Muhammad. What's going on? What does it mean? Is it allowed or not allowed? Well, apparently, it's more than allowed to show portraits of Prophet Muhammad. It's all right. Believe me, or better, don't believe me. Check for yourselves. If you travel far Asia, Afghanistan, Pakistan, it's quite common to see portraits of Muhammad. It's only fundamentalist groups that give a bad reputation to a person that was a revolutionary back in the days. He brought great wisdom down to earth. He ascended to the sky to a meeting with Allah, coming back with the pillars of Islam, declaring himself as the last prophet. But not the last meaningful character to visit here. There were others, like the Crusaders coming to conquer the holy sites for the Christian religion, like the Ottomans, who were here for hundreds of years, even protecting this country from the famous French midget that tried to come and take over. Didn't really work out for Napoleon, but it worked much better for the British man that was here from 1917 until 1948. Now, before a miracle happened, and Israel was born. Now, there are many reasons why we should refer to it as a miracle. Finally, we get to see that this little country that is maybe stuck in the middle of the desert is in the middle between Asia, Africa, and Europe. Because of that, it has an abundance of different kinds of landscapes and views in a small territory, which is only 8,000 square miles. Like, that's all. But before I share with you the magic that exists inside this country, most important thing to mention is that it's a home. It's finally a home. I know it's hard to understand, but I am Jewish. I was born here and raised here, but I remember the tattoos that my grandparents had on their arms. They are all Holocaust survivors. We don't take it for granted, the fact that we have a place to call home. I know some of our friends are coming from India watching this right now. When I was in India, I was so connected to the spiritual expression Om, which connects you to the divine, connects you to yourself, connects you to your home. The sound Om, that sensation of Om, was something that was neglected from the Jewish people for many, many years. Thousands of years. And now all of a sudden, finally, we have a place to call home, to live there. And even though it's just 8,000 square miles, and even smaller than New Jersey, it's our home. And we have everything inside this home. We have mountains, we have lakes, we have rivers. Maybe small. When you say the Jordan River, it's not even close to the Mississippi or the Ganges or the Amazonas. But it's our Jordan River. It's our Sea of Galilee. It's our beaches. It's a place to call home. Maybe Mount Hermon is not as exciting as, the mountains in North America. It's maybe 1/3 of its size. But as I always say, maybe we don't have the highest mountain in the world, but we do have the lowest place on earth. And that's the Dead Sea. Now, some people would argue it's not a coincidence that the lowest place on earth is here in Israel. There is a feeling like Israel is attracting a lot of attention. Maybe it's gravitation, huh? Maybe. Some people would argue, and for good reasons, that the main reason why Israel attracts so much attention is the famous Middle East conflict. But I can guarantee you, now the situation is very, very unique. It doesn't happen every day that we have such a war on such a scale that it shuts down the whole country. That never really happens. Even though we have situations here and now, the media bombards that a lot more than it actually being sensed on the ground. Israel, for the most part, is a very peaceful place. And those of you who have been to Israel were surprised to see how peaceful it is. This is the reason why I feel comfortable saying that the main reason why Israel attracts so much attention is the brand, the Holy Land. There's so many people out there in the world that see this country as a special place that makes you feel a connection to something that is beyond your perception, place that connects you to God. And it makes you wonder, is this really like the land of God? Is this really the promised land? If it is promised, who is it promised to? Is there some form of chosen people out there? Now, those are some of the controversial questions that people ask when they're coming over here to Israel. I have my answers to those questions, but I'll save them till the end. Until then, I want you to get a better understanding of the situation, get to know me a little bit better, and also ask questions. If you have any questions, you're more than welcome to share them on the comments or on the Facebook page, and I will get to them in the question section. Till we get there, like I mentioned before, we need imagination in order to get a better understanding of the situation. And the state of Israel, the Holy Land, is inviting us into a new consciousness. Now, we have all gone through the global spiritual retreat called COVID when we asked ourselves big questions, and we kind of realized that there's something big going on over here. And when people are thinking about the big questions, people are looking at this view. And the reason for that is because, according to both Jewish perception and Christian perception, this is where the world started from. Underneath that golden dome, there is a rock. It's called the Rock of Foundation. This is where we believe the world was founded from. And when it was founded, and expand and expand and expand and expand, yet people have always sensed this unique energy coming from that specific stone, a sensation that made them feel whole, complete. And this is why we call this sensation Shalem. The original name of the place was Shalem. That is the place where the binding of Isaac will take place. This is the place where the first temple and the second temple will be built. The temple, people need to understand, the purpose of the temple was a place of celebrating a unique connection to the divine. Now, I know there are many names for the divine, but the name that I like using the most is life. Because life is a part of me and I'm a part of life. And while language is a very limited way of explaining and transferring information, emotion and sensations sometimes are much better. Life is the only word that explains that we are experiencing a journey inside a facility of energy where we get to explore, but most importantly, we get to discover ourselves. And every once in a while, we need to celebrate that connection. And the best way to celebrate that connection is what we call Hilula, a spiritual celebration. And that spiritual celebration was celebrated here in this temple. Imagine this platform. There's no DJ, there's a high priest, and there are no speakers. The people are the speakers, and they're singing songs that praise life, songs of hallelujah, praising God. Now, that sensation was so strong and so big that people used to say that if you never celebrated in the temple, you don't know what a celebration is. Which is quite similar to what people say about the Burning Man today in America. Yet, let me ask you this. Do you think that in 2,000 years from now, people will yearn to go back to the Burning Man in the same way that generations after generations, Jewish people have been yearning to come back to Jerusalem after they were exiled? Maybe, I don't know. But one thing for sure, Jews were yearning to come back to their home. And how do we know that? We can hear it in their songs. For example, there's the famous Boney M song, by the rivers of Babylon, where we sat down, ere we wept, when we remember Zion. Now, what is Zion? Very interesting question. Now, I see there's people from all around the world. Let's assume you are from Texas. So you write Dallas, and then all of a sudden you see a red pin, like you see now on the screen. That red pin in Hebrew is Tzion, or in English, Zion. Now, that Zion, Tzion, has two meanings. First, it means where I live physically. Second, it means where my heart belongs. So for Jewish people, even though they were in Babylon, by the rivers, they were yearning to go back to Zion, where they're physically from, where their heart belong, where they feel connected to the soil. Judaism, by the way, is the only religion in the world that is connected to a specific earth, to a specific soil, to a specific land. If you want to be Christian, you can be Christian everywhere. If you want to be Muslim, you can be Muslim everywhere. If you want to be Buddhist, you can be Buddhist everywhere. If you want to be Jewish, you can be Jewish everywhere, but there is a specific land that it is your holy land that was given to you by God. Now, while Jewish people have been to the diaspora, other people came into the territory. And those are the Arabs, also known, some of them, as the Muslims. This place is becoming the third holiest place in the world for Muslim people, because this is where Muhammad is ascending to his famous meeting with Allah. And the local residents of the land, well, they became the local Palestinians. Now, why the Palestinians? Why are they called Palestinians? That's an interesting question. Well, let's go back a little bit, okay? Remember the Romans? Well, the Romans and the Jewish people, yeah, the Romans that like drinking and having sex and killing. Well, as you can possibly imagine, their concept of life contradicts the spiritual essence of Judaism. So there were a few clashes, minor ones and then big ones, and then there was the big rebellion, the Jews rebelling against the Romans. In the end of that rebellion, the Jewish temple was destroyed by the Romans, and the Romans pretty much said, we had enough of those Jewish people. We wish to erase the race of the Jewish people from the face of the earth. Now, how do you do that? First of all, you kill whoever you can kill. You exile whoever you can exile. But then you have to think about another thing. And what is that? You change the brand. You change the name. You make sure that nobody remembers what it used to be called. They called it Provincia Judea. Let's change it. What nation came at the same time as the Israelites? The Philistines. The Philistines. Remember Goliath? So Goliath, he was a Philistine. If there is a connection between him and the Palestinians, no, nothing. The Philistines vanished from the face of the earth already at 1000 BC, pretty much. So the name to the territory was given by the Romans. And later on, when the Ottoman Empire will come into the area, they will use this name as well. When the British mandate is taking over this territory, they're also using that name as well, Palestinian territory. So when we are talking about this area becoming a Muslim holy site, the local residents of the lands are Palestinians. And at that time, Jewish people are living in different parts of Europe. Some of them were living good, some of them are living very good, some of them are living extremely good. Like this guy, Theodor Herzl, he's considered the visionary of the state of Israel. He was the person that came with the vision that a Jewish state has to be established. Why? If he was living such a good life, why it was so important for him to establish a Jewish state in Palestine? Because he was coming from a good family. He received good education. He was actually a lawyer. But then he liked journalism, and he was covering a case where a Jewish officer in the French army was blamed for treason. And he saw the anti-Semitism in the streets, and he realized if the Jewish people will not have a land, they will not survive. So this is why he came with this grand idea, and he founded the Zionist Congress. The Zionist Congress was meant to bring the Zionists back to Zion, the Jewish people back to Zion. People told him that he is crazy. But as Steve Jobs well said, it's only those crazy people who think that they can change the world that eventually do. And he was one of them. He was one of those crazy people. He said a sentence that every Israeli knows: Im tirtzu en zo agada. If you will it, it will happen. And he inspired dozens and tens of dozens of Jewish people, Zionist people, to migrate to Palestine and establish little communities. Some of you are maybe familiar with the term kibbutzim and moshavim, those Jewish communes with Jewish ideology that became really, really common during the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th. And most of them had good relationships with the local Palestinians in the land. But with some of them, there was a tension. Especially the tension rose because of the relationships with the British mandate. The British mandate had a hard time with the Jews. Jews can be quite stubborn. As a Jew, I can tell you, we can be a little bit annoying. Yet also the Palestinians are quite annoying. I have to tell you that. So having to deal with the Jews, having to deal with the Palestinians, having to deal with the Jews fighting with the Palestinians and their tensions between them, well, that was one of the reasons that made them leave the area and escalate a tension that will later on rise to what we know today as the Middle East conflict. Now, this conflict is a huge conflict. It's a really, really big conflict. It's very, very complicated. And the problem is that people don't understand how complicated it is. They don't even understand the layers. So it's shocking when, for example, president of the biggest country in the world, United States of America, is coming to Israel and he says, get out of the settlements and then there will be peace. No, this is like telling somebody who has cancer, just take some aspirin and everything will be fine. It doesn't work like that. You have to understand the complexity. You have to understand the mentality of the regime. You have to understand the way people live their life and what intrigues them, what blocks them from communicating. Now, what I have for you is a formula that will help you understand the complex situation, and we're going to walk step by step, layer by layer. And the idea is that you will have a better understanding of what this conflict is made of. And when you understand the layers of the conflict, you will have an easier time understanding what is a solution that I will offer by the end of this presentation. Okay? Okay. So the first layer is the conflict that exists between Zionists / Israelis and Palestinians. In 1947, when David Ben-Gurion, who will later become the first prime minister of the state of Israel, he recognizes that the British mandate is about to leave. So he goes to the UN and he asks for a recognition in a Jewish state. And that's a big deal. The problem is that according to Islam, it's not allowed to recognize a municipality which is not Muslim, especially not a Jewish one. So when the UN recognized the Jewish state, that created a civil war between the Zionists and the Palestinians. a war that lasted almost a year and ended when, in 1948, David Ben-Gurion recognized that the British mandate is leaving, and that was the opportunity to declare a state. Now, the people in his government said to him, why declare a state? It will create a war with Lebanon, with Syria, with Jordan, with Egypt. But David Ben-Gurion said, ladies and gentlemen, it's now or never. And he went up to the stage in a bomb shelter in Tel Aviv and declared a state. And when he left the hall of independence, the state of Israel was independent, but not free, because that initiated the war. A war with our neighbors, Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, Egypt, and to the party joined Syria, Saudi Arabia, Iran, and Iraq. They even told the local Palestinians, get out of your homes, we will finish the job in 2 hours. They were sure that 7 armies will defeat the young country immediately, but they were wrong. And this is why the Palestinians are calling 1948 not the War of Independence, but actually the Nakba, the day of the disaster. That was the war where they lost their homes. Imagine families. I know you might think they are my enemy, but I have a lot of sympathy for a lot of Palestinians, and I feel sorry for them, because imagine receiving a message in the radio from those Arab armies telling you to leave your home and come back in 2 hours when they finish the job. And you leave warm food on the table. Yeah, Israelis actually found warm food on the tables in their villages. And then imagine they didn't have a place to come back to. They couldn't come back home. Imagine how awful was that. So now we understand the second layer of the conflict. There is a conflict not just between Zionists and Palestinians. There's also a conflict between Israel and the neighbors, which doesn't end when the War of Independence ends. It actually continues. Excuse me 1 second. Drink some water. It will escalate, and there will be many, many combats. Yet the biggest ones are the one in 1967 and 73. In 1967, the Jordanian army and the Syrian army, they thought they would attack Israel by surprise. They didn't take into consideration that Israel has one of the best intelligence in the world, and according to the Bible, it says that if somebody wakes up early in order to kill you, you should wake up earlier. So at least in 1967, Israel had great intelligence and woke up earlier and struck first, and was able to eliminate, not in 6 days, but actually in the first 6 hours, the air forces of both Jordan and Syria and Egypt. And then it took 5 more days and 18 hours to finish the job. And when the job was finished, Israel took over the Golan Heights, Sinai Peninsula, Gaza, and most important, the West Bank, which includes, check this out, it includes Jerusalem. Jerusalem, the holiest place on earth for Jewish people. Imagine after 2,000 years in the diaspora, Jewish people finally have access to the holiest place on earth for them. And as you already recognized, it's a spiritual society. It's a religious society. It's a society that those kind of elements are important to them. Yet the war doesn't end there in 1967. Unfortunately, with all due respect to the intelligence and with all due respect to the amazing victories we had in the past, in 1973, Syria and Egypt were able to surprise Israel. And when they surprised, they did it good, because they decided to attack Israel by surprise on a Saturday of Yom Kippur. Now, Saturday, for those of you who are not familiar a little bit with the concept, the Sabbath, the Saturday, the 7th day of the week, is a holiday for Jewish people. It's actually the most important holiday of the year, but we celebrate it every week. And it's a day where you are commanded to rest and reflect on your journey, spend meaningful time with the people you love, like your partner, your children, your family, your friends. Do something meaningful with them. And as we all know, when we live a meaningful life, we kind of recognize that sometimes we do good things, sometimes we do bad things. And one of the things that is important to do when you do bad things or when you recognize that you've made a mistake is to ask for forgiveness. So we have a day in the year, which is called Yom Kippur, the day of forgiveness, where we take the time and we fast, we don't eat throughout the whole day, and we ask for forgiveness. So imagine on that Saturday, early in the morning, all of a sudden, the phones are ringing, people are being called on duty to come as fast as they can to the different borders where Israel was attacked by surprise, and we were not ready. Now, when that war was over, lucky for us, they did not accomplish their goal, our enemies, which was to, take over Israel and exile all the Jewish people again from their homeland. Israel was able to preserve its territory, but lost a lot of people. More than 2,000 people dead, and more than 20,000 people died on the Arab side. Yet, an interesting fact is that while we talk about this second layer of the conflict, and even if we include the first layer of the conflict between Zionists and the Palestinians and Israel and their neighbors, if I'll exaggerate, in 75 years of constant fighting, 130,000 people died. If I exaggerate, that's including the 1,400 people that died on the 7th of October. Who knows what is happening still with the kidnapped? Still, it doesn't come even close to the people who are dying in the ongoing conflict between the countries of the Middle East. Let me just give you one example. Between 1980 and 1988, one war between Iran and Iraq, between Shia and Sunni, 800,000 people dead. Do you hear this number? 800,000 people dead. So obviously, the Arabs have a few issues that they're not able to solve. But for some reason, there are certain people out there that are looking for new ways. And when they look for new ways, some of them are actually looking in a good place, like Egypt. All of a sudden, 1978, Egypt is signing a peace contract with Israel. That is surprise, like the biggest enemy. All of a sudden, Sadat is coming here. That was huge, huge. Who would have thought? So it shows that there's not one single voice that speaks through the Arabs' mouth. They have different opinions, and while some of them are reaching hands for peace, some of them are reaching a hand for terror. Because some of our enemies recognize that this face-to-face battle between them and Israel is not really working for them. So how about trying a new way? For example, terrorism. This is why we keep hearing about Iran investing money in Hezbollah in Lebanon, and Syria investing money in Hamas, including Qatar, where we all know that their leaders, while Palestinian people are being killed, and who knows what's happening to them, because Hamas is doing that to them, not even Israel. They're sitting in chef restaurants in Qatar, enjoying life, and using those innocent people as a human shield, because they believe that we have to eliminate the Zionist threat. How did that come? Well, there are certain leaders in the Muslim world that kind of recognize the potential that exists in blaming Israel, in blaming Zion, and recognizing that if they will eliminate the Jewish people, Zion, the state of Israel, that will give them so much honor and prestige in the Arab world that could make them the leaders of the Arab nation. Now, it's 1.5 billion people around the world. That's serious, guys. That is the reason why the fourth layer of the conflict is the conflict that Israel has with the whole Arab world. And this is how we found ourselves in this situation, because think about it. Israel never threatened Iraq. Israel never threatened Iran up until the 70s of the last century. Israelis could go back and forth to Iran People had business relationships with Iranians. Why on earth would they threaten us? Constantly try to develop nuclear weapon and shoot it all the way to Israel. Why? Why? We haven't done anything bad to you. So we have four conflicts. We have the conflict between Zionists and Palestinians. We have the conflict between Israel and their neighbors. We have the conflict between the Arabs themselves that has nothing to do with Israel, but it affects Israel directly when some leaders in the Arab world are trying to use our conflict as an instrument to raise more popularity, to raise more honor and prestige in the Arab world. Now, I remember when I heard about this model that I'm sharing with you from Professor Gabi Ben-Dor in Haifa University. He ended his presentation by quoting Albert Einstein saying, if you wish to solve a problem, you have to use a different mindset than the one that has created it. Now, that made me wonder. And when it made me wonder, I decided to look elsewhere. I went and spoke with a friend of mine. He's a very popular Zen master here in Israel. And I asked him, how do you perceive the Middle East conflict? And he says to me something very nice. He says, Erez, you know, all conflicts, they start from within. If you have peace within, you don't have conflicts with anybody else. And this is when it hit me. That before we have a conflict with the Palestinians, before we have a conflict with our neighbors, before we have a conflict with the Arab world, we, Israel, don't enjoy admitting it, but we have a conflict within. And how do I know that? Well, unfortunately, there's too many examples to prove that. First one is coming from the 90s. We had a prime minister called Yitzhak Rabin, the chief of staff of the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force in the Six-Day War. You can only imagine how much prestige and honor this guy has. He became a prime minister that almost created peace in the Middle East, shook the hands of Yasser Arafat, Palestinian with blood on his hands. Just shows how much he was willing to do just in order to move onward. Signing a peace contract with the king of Jordan. He was that close to signing a peace contract also with Syria, willing to give back the Golan Heights to them just in order to achieve peace. And when he was very, very close, he arranged a peace rally in Tel Aviv, where he got everybody excited about peace. So excited, made them believe that peace is around the corner. Now, he was preaching to people that, you know, saw a lot. Some of them served in the army and saw their friends getting killed. Some of them had their friends died. Some of them experienced terror attacks. All of a sudden, this peace rally. And when that peace rally ended, he sang a song for peace to everybody that everybody will remember forever. Look at this rally. In the end of that rally, Yitzhak Rabin will be assassinated, not by a Palestinian, not by a Syrian, and not by a missile that was sent from Iran. Yitzhak Rabin was assassinated by an Israeli Jew that said, in the name of God, I'm willing to kill this person because he's willing to give back territories that were given to me by God. So he's like a Nazi to me. His name is Yigal Amir, and he doesn't regret what he has done. He believed that he did the right thing. Yitzhak Rabin was also sure he was doing the right thing when he sang a song for peace. The song says, sing a song for peace, don't whisper a prayer, sing a song for peace and scream it out loud. Imagine those people, they were sure that peace is around the corner, and then somebody from the inside kills the prime minister. You know, when Yitzhak Rabin was taken to the hospital and he was taken off of his clothes, they found piece of paper with lyrics that says, sing a song for peace. Don't whisper a prayer. Sing a song for peace and scream it out loud. Can you see the bullet? Difficult. So next time, before you start the blame game, start within. And when you start within, stop playing the victim. There is this tendency to play around our regime the game, who is the victim? Is it the Palestinians who are being apartheided by the Israelis? Is it Israel, that is just a small country in the Middle East, and we are surrounded by the Arab nations? Don't play the victim game. Try to ask yourself how you can be the king of your reality and not how you can be the victim of your reality. And when you think like a king, think like the king of the world and try to understand exactly what he wants from you, because I can promise you one thing. I was exploring a lot of different spiritual methods. These guys don't know what God wants. They maybe pretend to say, we know what God wants. They don't. They don't. Because I can promise you, God doesn't want you to send 2 airplanes and knock the Twin Towers in New York. God doesn't want you to create nuclear weapon and send it towards Israel. God doesn't want terrorists. He doesn't want. I can promise you. He also doesn't want Yigal Amir to assassinate his prime minister, and doesn't want Baruch Goldstein to go into the Machpelah cave in Hebron and spray 72 innocent Muslim believers who came there to pray and kill them on the spot. That's not what God wants. I can promise you that, because I read the Bible. I read the New Testament. I read significant parts of the Quran. I study Buddhism. I study all different kinds of methods. This is what God really wants. He wants us to coexist. And he wants us to live together as one big global community. And the question is how we do it. Now, before I get to how we do it, let's see if we have some questions. Let me see some questions. We have some questions? Yes, we do? Okay. Okay. So let me see what are the questions. Okay. So you're saying that, sorry, there's a question that comes here. Hamas was elected democratically. How come you say that they don't represent the Palestinian people? Well, let's say this. I'm sure some of you have Netflix. And if you have Netflix, you probably saw The House of Cards. Maybe you saw Fauda. Maybe you saw Narcos. Try to mix these 3 theories together and you get what is happening in Gaza. There is just an awful use of power, of brutality, of barbarism. I can promise you that if you check yourselves and see what is really happening over there and how the Hamas is treating his own people, not just in Gaza, but also in prisons in Israel, they are torturing their own people. I actually came across this interview from what we call here the angel in Israel. He is a person that he is the son, one of the leaders of Hamas, one of the people that established Hamas. And he wrote a book about what Hamas is really all about and what the Palestinian people are really feeling. Let me show you a short part of what he says about the Hamas organization that he was born into. Second. I probably put it here. Here. Okay, ready? Here it is.
Unfortunately, now Hamas left Israel and the free world as well, with no choice but to fight them and put an end for their violence. Many civilians are dying. I understand this. Their blood is on the hands of Hamas and Hamas only.
It's interesting you say that, because a lot of pro-Palestinians who I've had on the show in the last 2 weeks don't accept that argument. They say the blood of the civilians in Gaza is exclusively on the hands of Israel, and that Israel's waged a repressive occupation for many decades. There's been a prison camp for Gazans for a long, long time, and that has created the environment through which a terror group like Hamas can thrive and indeed win an election, as they did in 2005. Do you buy into any of that? I mean, do you think that Israel has overreacted already to what happened to them? Their argument is, what is proportion when you have a terror attack like that on your people?
Look, since my childhood, and I am hearing the stories from pro-Palestine and from those who are using what's so-called the Palestinian cause. They care the least for the Palestinian children and their future. You know, I am the legitimate representative of the Palestinian children. The child within me speaks. I don't want somebody coming from London or somebody coming from the other side of the world to tell me what is the struggle of the Palestinian children. The Palestinian children, the Palestinian society has been hijacked by these criminals, and anybody who takes their side is participating in their crime. This is my answer to those people. And for the civilian casualties, etc., you know, first of all, Hamas is using, and it's very clearly, it's a fact that Hamas used civilians as human shields. It's a fact. Then it's a fact that Israel called and warned civilians to evacuate buildings before they strike them. But in the meantime, Hamas put roadblocks to stop civilians from evacuating to safe zones. Hamas single misfire killed hundreds of refugees taking shelter at a hospital, and they blamed Israel. What are we talking about here? Israel is a democracy. Israel is accountable. Israel is not thirsty for the Palestinian blood. In the meantime, Israel is capable of wiping out Arab capitals in seconds.
Highly recommend watching this full interview with the angel, this son of Hamas leader, that is just explaining very, very clearly what Hamas is all about. Guys, this is a terror organization. This is a terror organization. And I see there's another question here that why there is no deal to release the kidnapped? Well, there's nobody to really talk to. They're just trying to waste time because Israel has, you know, like they poked the bear. They understand that now they're finished. And we don't really know who is holding the strings. Could be that, you know, Iran, we actually know for sure it's Iran, but who knows who is trying to join the party. There are other allies to this evilness that is an outcome of huge ego that politicians around the world have, trying to dominate different territories. And this conflict in the Middle East could escalate. And while that could escalate, there are certain things that are happening now here on the ground. They're trying to waste time. So there are no real allies to discuss anything with regards to releasing the kidnapped civilians and soldiers. And by having said that, I'm not an expert in the field, but the sensation here in Israel and what I'm getting from the news is that from the beginning, it was pretty clear that you cannot trust them, that we know for sure. We were hoping to use some connections, some relationships that people have with Hamas. Well, we know for sure that will never work. They were just trying to waste time so they can rearrange. But what they didn't take into consideration is that they were able to surprise Israel. But Israel is about to surprise them big time. Big time. And just like the angel said, Hamas is doomed. There's no other way. Like you poke the bear big time. Israel is the superpower of the Middle East. We can do amazing things if we get together. The problem is when we don't get together. The problem is when we don't use our strength. And before I get to that, I see there's another question that comes up, and that's about the UN. Why the UN is not doing anything? Well, people think that the UN is the United Nations, but it's not really the United Nations. If you check that out, you will see that 40% of the countries that are being represented in the UN are Arabs and Muslims who are supportive of the Muslim notion that it's not allowed to recognize a non-Muslim municipality in the empire of Muhammad the Prophet, or their feelings restrained to that notion. So they cannot support the state of Israel. They cannot support releasing the kidnapped civilians. And also they're quite in favor. This is why every time that something happens in Israel, all of a sudden it hits the media, and some claim against human rights is being placed against Israel. This is such a hypocrite organization that you cannot really trust. So even now, when I was in New York, I was actually in New York last week, and my mother says to me, you should go, there's a demonstration. And I said, there's no point going there. Why not? For the same reasons that I mentioned to you. I even shared with her that it will be easier to convince a vegan Jew to eat bacon. It will be easier to convince him to eat bacon before somebody in the UN will do something. So what should we do? She asked me. And then I told her this. If you ask me, what we should do is not demonstrate in front of the UN. We should demonstrate where it really matters at this time. And that is in front of the offices of Google, of Facebook, of Instagram, TikTok. This is where the conversation is really happening. Because look, Israel will take Hamas down. There's no question about it. That will happen. And if Hezbollah decides to join, they will go down as well. And if somebody else decides to join, lucky for us, we have America on our side. And you can say whatever you want to say about America, but Americans are good partners. It's good that we have you with us. We are liberation fighters. We really strive to create a beautiful world together. Now, the social media is polarizing us by doing two things. One, it bombards fake news. People give a platform to fake news. You can see it on Twitter, on Facebook, it's unbelievable how we can allow such false information go into the lives of billions of people around the world. This is again an opportunity for me to thank you for making the effort and watching this presentation. That means, at least for me, that you want to understand the truth, the reality. And while I'm saying that, please doubt everything that I have to say and go check for yourselves. You will see the reality on the ground. But don't trust what you just see on the media. Really try and explore, and you will understand that we have a problem. And another problem is that it's not just us, it's actually the medium. The medium is polarizing us. When you watch something on Facebook, you either like it or don't like it. When you watch something on Instagram, I like it or don't like it. It's not that. There's not 50 shades of gray to everything. There's 500 million shades of white on how we can perceive the reality or how we can look into the world. And there's no point polarizing us all day long. That's not helpful. This is what we've been seeing in Israel for the past years. It's been awful. Again, as I mentioned before, if you wish to create peace, start from within. The fact that Hamas was able to surprise us so badly on the 7th of October is especially because we were too busy fighting each other. Those of you who are a little bit familiar with what's happening in Israel in the last few years would know that we had elections every other year, parties fighting. The last election, Bibi came back into power, but that created a phenomenon of demonstrations against him. Every week we see a protest. It became like a Burning Man of protests over here. Every Saturday it's happening. Now, I'm not saying who is right and who is wrong. I'm not here to define what is the ideal government of Israel. I'm here to ask how we move forward and onward. And what happened here with this demonstration just polarized us, right against left, calling each other traitors, Jewish people calling one another traitors. How can that be? That reminds me back 2,000 years ago with what happened when the temple was destroyed. And in many, many ways, the hatred, the false hatred that we are experiencing here could get us doomed. What happened with Gaza right now, with Hamas attacking us, maybe it's something that saved us from killing one another. But this is not an excuse to not recognize what was happening here before. As Israelis, we have to take more responsibility and not let our leaders, not let anybody teach us that we should hate one another. Our leaders are not supposed to polarize us, and the people who are in charge of social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, all of that, you have responsibility, my friends. You hold people's opinion. And while there's a war on the ground, which I'm sure Israel would win, because we're strong and smart, and Hamas is an evil terror organization that even though they're hiding either behind and under hospitals, there's no other way. Yet afterwards, it's the war of consciousness. And on the war of consciousness and global opinion, we need the people of the technological world to support our cause. And how we expect them to help us? By helping us share better education. For example, not the education that the kids of Hamas are receiving. Let me show you what's happening there. Ran away from me. 1 second. This. Second, I will erase that in the editing. This is something that my wife sent me today. And you have to see it because it's important. It will show you exactly how Hamas is teaching their own children to hate. It's the worst thing in the world. Hate. This is exactly what they're teaching. Hate, hatred. Yeah. Said but true. Here we go.
Your children run in the park. Your children go to school. Your children play hide and seek. You want the best for your children. These are the children of Hamas ISIS. You wouldn't want them to be your children's friend. From a young age, they're already Hamas ISIS.
Because Nelson Mandela well said that education is the most powerful which you can use to change the world. And you can use it in order to create bad things like ISIS is doing. But you can also use it in order to create good. But in order to create good, you have to think in a creative way. Let me share with you an example. William Ury, in his famous talk on TED about how we can solve the Middle East conflict, starts the conversation with a story about 17 camels that one father left in his will for his 3 sons. He left for the first son half of the camels, for the second son a third of the camels, and the third one 1/9 of the camels. As you can possibly imagine, that was quite problematic because 17 doesn't divide by 2, it doesn't divide by 3, it doesn't divide by 9. So create clashes until, lucky for them, before they started killing one another, they went and consulted with a wise woman, a wise old woman that said to them, look, guys, I don't know how to solve your problem, but if you want, you can have my camel. And they were like, what? What do you expect us to do with your camel? And she says, well, now you have 18. You're supposed to get half of the camels. Here are 9 camels. You're supposed to get 1/3 of the camels. Here are 6 camels. And you're supposed to get 1/9 of the camels. So here are 2. 9 plus 6 is 15. 15 plus 2 is 17. The old wise lady said, can I have my camel back right now? And that's the thing, guys. It's about thinking differently. And what William Ury from Harvard University thought of is about how we can connect between people. And what he found out in his research is that what you need to do is find a character, somebody that everybody can relate to, like Abraham the father. Doesn't matter whether you are Jewish or Christian or Muslim, everybody can relate to Father Ibrahim, Abraham the father, Avraham Avinu, and his notion of hospitality and connection to something that is beyond our perception. I always say to all the high-tech people that come here to Israel that Abraham was the first person to recognize the Wi-Fi. And they're like, what? Yeah, I say he discovered monotheism. So what's the connection? I say, well, most of the people used to worship idols. Like today, people are worshiping applications or programs or websites like Facebook or TikTok or whatever. They spend most of their time on these platforms thinking that this is so important to just be there, to be seen, to share the information with the world. Yet with all due respect to all of those applications, they're all being generated by the big Wi-Fi in the sky. Abraham found a connection to God. He found what is yashar in the eyes of the Allah, like what is the sense of morality, like what is the direct connection to God, what is yashar to El, what is the direct way to God, and what is his sense of morality. The people that followed Abraham and his yashar El are the original people of Israel, the people that wanted to learn how to directly connect to God and his moral code. Abraham will share with the world a new way of thinking. And the journey that he took into himself, that was the journey that changed the world and enable a new way of thinking. And this is something that I invite everybody to do. To get out of your comfort zone, get out of the couch where you keep receiving information from the media and actually look for yourself. And also take a stand, if it's necessary, against people who are using the situation in Israel in the wrong way. What I would also recommend is really try and use a different perspective. And that different perspective that I want to offer you is the spiritual perspective. Because if we started this conversation by asking, where is the promised land? And who are the chosen people? What I would like to finish with is saying that after visiting many countries around the world, after talking with people from all different cultures and religions, what I found out is that the whole world is one big promised land. And the chosen people are the people that choose to execute the promise and bring this world to the Garden of Eden it was meant to be from the beginning. And in order for us to do that, we have to change our perception about the reality and how it's being created. For the next few minutes, I want you to adopt a new mindset. I want you to connect to your consciousness, this part in your awareness that recognizes that you're connected to something that is beyond your perception. You don't have to be spiritual in order to understand that actually the whole world recognizes, especially after COVID, that there's something special going on over here. There's some energy that we are connected to it. And even though it looks dark right now, it's always darker before the light gets to shine. And it will shine when we learn to understand our consciousness and how we create the reality. And according to the spiritual world and modern science, we create the reality that we are experiencing with the way we think, the way we speak, and the way we act. What we need to do is use this current situation where the whole world is looking towards Israel and make sure that we eliminate evil from the source. We make sure that we prevent it from future happening. After we finish the work on the ground, releasing the kidnapped, destroying Hamas, we have to start functioning in a new way. That first of all, heals the post-trauma that people on both sides have, on Israeli side and on the Palestinian side. What we need to do is to teach people that we can create a new reality. And when we create a new reality, we do not accept even the slightest of evilness. We don't accept missiles being shot toward our country. We do not accept women being raped. We do not accept people being mugged. We don't accept any crime at all. It's time to shift awareness and create not just a reality like the one that we had before, because that reality was okay, but not absolutely okay. We wish to create the ideal reality. In order for us to experience that, I want you to close your eyes for a moment. Take a deep breath in. And as the air goes out, you feel relaxed, you feel present. Another deep breath in. And as the air goes out, you feel like you're in a journey, like a good traveling experience where you are curious about everything that happens around you, and it's clear beyond any doubt that you are here to have fun. Let's take another deep breath in. And as the air goes out, we feel present in the present. We feel aware of this gift we were given called life. And I want you to imagine how, in your eyes, in your view, an ideal world looks like. How the earth looks, how the water flows, how the light shines, how the air is accepted by your lungs, by your energy. Take a moment to enjoy that and feel gratitude for the ideal world you wish to create. And keep breathing gently. Imagining how life looks like when we live like brothers and sisters that are connected to ourselves and to the divine. Imagine how our relationships looks like, how the society that we live in look like. How does it feel to love thy neighbor? To feel connected to everyone, not being afraid of anyone or anything. How does it affect your house, the way you're dressed, when you know that you can be everything and everything? Imagine what role in that society, in this perfect society that you are now feeling gratitude for, you take. What is your position? What do you do in an ideal world? If you could do anything in a perfect society, what would you do? And how would it affect the person who is close to you, like your partner or your friend or your son or your daughter or your mother? How does it affect them? The way you use your talent, your gift. How does it affect you? Being able to do what you love doing the most, what you feel a higher purpose to do. How does it affect the whole world? You being connected. How does it feel to live in a world where there are people who are connected to the higher purpose and act upon it? Imagine that world, this happiness. How does it feel? And already feel gratitude for living in that community of that society. Be there, enjoy it to the fullest. Let's take another deep breath in. And as the air goes out, let's open our eyes and connect to the present of now. My dear friends, I want to thank you again for taking the time to get a better understanding of a situation that looks horrible right now. Yet in the Jewish world, we believe that we are growing from conflict. And there's a growth opportunity that exists in this situation. We have to make sure that these innocent souls did not die in vain, that the people of Israel are not suffering for nothing, that there is a future also for the innocent people of Palestine, not the members of Hamas that are destroying their own people, to the innocent civilians of Gaza. Let's make sure that we create a future for everybody. And we can create this future by each and every one of us making it personal. Because if it happens here, you are next. Doesn't matter. Even if you live in New Zealand, my friend, it will happen to you as well. Yet if we prevent it here, we can prevent it from happening in the whole world. So I want you to take a piece of paper and a pen and write your prayer. Prayer is not something that you ask for yourself, but actually something that you ask to give from yourself. Think about something that bothers you and how a special talent that you were given can help prevent it. For example, me, I'm bothered by the Middle East conflict. I'm bothered from the fact that I will have to raise a child, a daughter, in this world where I don't feel confident because of terrorists might come to my house, or I can't send her to a rave in the desert one day. So I'm doing the best I can in order to explain the situation and inspire people to connect to their higher purpose, because I believe that each and every one of us, when we connect to our higher purpose, first of all, we prevent bad things from happening. Plus, we are creating the life that we really want to live in. So imagine how your prayer actually makes an impact on somebody close to you, how it makes an impact on the whole world. And then take a minute a day. And as time goes by, try to take more than 1 minute of just imagining how that is coming into fruition, because we create the reality with the way we think, speak, and act. And if we take time and practice our connection to our higher purpose, it's like a muscle. The more we work on it, the better it is. I can tell you on a personal level that I've been feeling this connection to the divine for many, many years. This is why I've been developing my digital version. Those of you who experience the tours with me know that I always try to inspire you to believe that we can create this harmony that we were prophesied by God from the beginning. And God says in the book of Zechariah, in the Bible, it's not going to be by strength, nor by might, by a spiritual revolution. It's a prophecy that was given from the Bible. And even though it looks dark, we are the closest we have ever been to become one. Yeah, I know it looks horrible. 1,400 people died. Yet just 100 years ago, a quarter of humanity will die in unnecessary wars. Unnecessary wars. Still, there is a time frame right now that we have to take advantage of it and inspire the world to eliminate all hatred. And when I created this product of virtual tours that inspire people to recognize that life is a journey of spiritual growth, I didn't know that the reality will be so bad on the ground. So if you wish, I'm inspiring you to contact me and learn more about the new venture that I have created that help people find their higher purpose, how to see life as an adventure to create a new reality, a new future for ourselves, for our children, for our future generations to come. We are privileged to live in a very special time in history when, despite the fact that it looks horrible, the situation now in the Middle East, we have never been as close as we are right now to recognize that the whole world is one big promised land, and it's time for us to execute the promise. So thank you very much for watching this presentation. You're more than welcome to share it with whoever you wish to share. You're more than welcome to send me more questions, keep in touch, learn more about my new venture that I'm about to launch very, very soon. And most important, let's make sure that we deliver. Thank you very much, and shalom from Israel.